Berlin, Germany for the epic conclusion of the LEC spring regular season. We are starting the week with 5 important matchups in the race for playoffs, including a much anticipated fight in the heated Fnatic versus G2 rivalry, and that'll be in Game 3. Hello everyone, I'm Eve, your Sjokz supporter, joined by Christy Ender Frierson and Alvar Araneae Martin Alienar. Welcome, gentlemen. I am so happy to be back, and I'm very happy to be back in week 9 when everything is left to be decided.
Oh man, the games are going to be so good this weekend because Sjokz, every game counts.
Yes, it does. And you might think that make the players very nervous. Alvar, if you were on stage and you had to play for your spot in playoffs, that must bring a lot of nerves with it.
Yeah, it's really nervous for everyone to be there, especially that teams who is like 6 and 7 plays, that these games, this weekend is really important for them.
Yeah, everything is really important, and there is a really important bit of news as well. The fact that coming into the final week, our top team G2 are making a big change. Promisq will be replacing mikyx in the bottom lane as the starting support. mikyx, of course, is struggling with a wrist injury. He has done now for a couple of weeks, so they found it better to bring in Promisq for these games.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Is to a lot of fans, it comes sort of out of left field, but really, this is something that Mickey has been fighting with throughout the course of the split. G2 have actually been practicing with Promisq, so while it is a big change in the bottom lane for them, it's not like they haven't been practicing with this player.
Yeah, but I am going to address the elephant in the room. Promisq doesn't have the best reputation when it comes to performance on stage. So, you know, there are a lot of people that have question marks around this substitution.
I mean, some people know him as Prattle, some people know him as Promisq, but he's this kind of player who is always on the spotlight by being not the best support. So far, he's been in a lot of teams, but I've been talking with a lot of AD carries, especially from the Challenger amateur scene, and a lot of people prize him by being really good mechanically. He's been always on the top of the Challenger scene. So I'm not going to say he's the worst player, and if obviously D2 pick him up, is because they have a good result with him.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we should give him the benefit of the doubt and wait until we see him on stage. But let's take a look at the standings, because for G2, it actually doesn't matter if they win or lose this weekend, because they are locked into first place.
Every game matters except from G2.
For that one. Well, it still matters for Fnatic though, and if you're G2, you do not want to lose to that team that you might be facing in playoffs. So let's take a look at then the teams that are locked in playoffs. G2 Esports, Origen, Splyce, Vitality. That means there are only 2 spots left, and they're up for grabs between Fnatic, Schalke, Misfits, and SK. Tell me, who's going to make it?
I mean, Fnatic, I think, are pretty obviously going to make it here. Not only is this team just in a better position, you know, they have 9 wins, the other teams have 8 or 7 wins, but they're also on a tear in the second half of the split. They've won their last 6 games in a row, and they're looking on fire.
They're shooing, it looks like. So who's the other team?
I think it's pretty hard to say because Schalke, Misfits, and SK last weeks, they are not looking that strong as we might see on the first weeks, for example, from Misfits or SK Gaming. Still, if I will have to vote for any of them, I will vote for SK Gaming because they are my old buddies. They have World Leap, Cellmate, and I really trust on them.
You really trust them? Well, they are going to need a lot of help, and with Misfits and SK Gaming, it's not all in their hands anymore. They need to win every game, and they also depend on other results and on other teams losing. So that battle is certainly going to heat up. I do also want to take a look at the top 2 there, because if you get to second place, you guarantee yourself a spot in Rotterdam with the new playoff system, and that's between Origen, Splyce, and Vitality. So who gets number 2?
Well, I don't think you can say right now that any team is a clear-cut favorite. You have Origen, Splyce, Vitality all neck and neck right there in the standings. I think my money would be on Origen. They've been playing very clean League of Legends, very sort of calm and collected, that have been able to put them into some nice situations in the mid to late game. And that's the sort of mindset, I think, that's going to help you succeed in playoffs.
What about the Fnatic second place miracle run?
That's going to be a bit hard. And also a point that I want to talk about is that the last week I came here was week 6 when Origen ended up being 0-2.
Yes.
So I hope I'm not that bad luck charm for them.
Well, maybe not. I mean, we do have to touch on the fact that Origen, when you were here, it didn't look like they might even make playoffs. They were looking for their form entirely. And the second half of the split, they have revitalized extremely, extremely well, and now even find themselves in a fight for second. I think all of the teams, Origen, Splyce, and Vitality, deserve a word of praise for how they've played so far.
They definitely do. And when you look at a team like Origen that was really struggling towards the front half of the split, you see they actually have a lot of newfound life nowadays, because I think all of the players sort of individually stepped up, but this is also a team that just reads their opposition very, very well. They're very good at understanding the strengths and weaknesses of the team they're playing against and sort of sculpting their play style to counter that.
Yeah, and it once again emphasizes that the split is a marathon, not a sprint, and that teams like Misfits, who started out and came out of the gates swinging, now have trouble actually closing it out. So yeah, you have to keep that tension going until the very last game and the very last nexus of the split.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to watch, especially this fight for the second spot between Origen, Splyce, and Vitality, because last split we saw a Vitality who was really strong. They changed the jungler, and you could believe they're going to be kind of the same. But Origen right now, they're looking so strong that actually it's going to be hard to vote for the second place.
So much left to be played for, and for more on what's at stake over the upcoming days, let's leave it to Medic.
Hello and welcome to Medic's playoff checkup. Now there are 10 teams, 10 games, and 2 to the power 10 scenarios remaining before our regular split standings are decided. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Medic, everyone keeps telling me hashtag every, hashtag game, hashtag counts. So why are you even here to explain it? Well, I'm here to tell you that although all games are created equal, some games are more equal than others. Let's start off with our last game of the day, Schalke playing up against Origen. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about Origen later. We're going to begin with Schalke. Sitting in 6th spot at 8-8 in our final playoff berth, Schalke hold an unenviable position. However, the odds are a little bit stacked in their favor. They've won their games against Misfits already, being 2-0 versus the Rabbits. Schalke would be placed on top if they had a head-to-head tiebreaker. The Royal Blues are also 1-1 in their head-to-heads versus SK and Fnatic, meaning that as long as Schalke stay even on win and loss with those other 3 teams, Schalke are guaranteed at least a tiebreaker for that 6th spot. Now, today's match might seem a little bit tricky. Origen are no easy giant to slay, but tomorrow Schalke play up against Rogue in a game they very much should be winning. Now let's have a look at the battle for a second. We know that Origen, Splyce, and Vitality are already locked into the playoffs, but that 2nd spot and the guaranteed place in Rotterdam alongside G2 is anything but secure. Win-loss for the teams is the primary metric we use to find where they place at the end of the split, but when they are even, we use their head-to-head record against each other. So what would happen if Origen, Splyce, and Vitality were tied at the end of the season? Well, Vitality fans will be very happy because we take the 3-way head-to-head to decide who places where. Because Vitality have a 2-0 over Splyce, their 3-way head-to-head is 3-1, putting them in that top spot. Origen have gone even with Vitality and Splyce across the course of the split, putting them in 2nd, and Splyce, having lost to Vitality twice, would be put in that 4th place. So Vitality would end up 2nd, Origen would be 3rd, and Splyce would be 4th. With a lot still up to grabs and 2 playoff spots yet to be decided, our final week appears to be one of the most exciting weeks of the LEC yet. To find out more about the race for playoff, though, let's hand it off to Vedius' mysterious half-brother.
Legend speaks of one man, a lonely hermit, one individual entirely dedicated to his art. Like a lotus blossoming in the violent wild, he has trained his entire life for this. For he knows there was never a calm before the storm. Only 9 weeks of chaos, of struggle and blood. This is the culmination of the world's greatest competition. Battles have been fought, victors have been forged, upsets and a spectacle of greatness have paved this road to victory. As teams will triumph and heroes will rise, only Foldius, through his immense piety and absolute devotion that raises the art of folding to an exquisite torture of the soul, will know ahead of all which teams make it to playoffs.
Wow, how many brothers does Vedius have? And they all get cooler every time.
That's a big family.
Yeah, exactly. I'm super excited for the Foldy sheet, of course. That will help us determine if we'll have tiebreakers, who will go to playoffs, this and that. But as an important note, it'll only be available from tomorrow on, because today there are simply just too many possible outcomes. We wouldn't fit that on any type of Foldy sheets. But now we are going to talk a bit about a game or a match that could have huge implications for not only the playoff race, but maybe even the championship if we think farther other than that. The match of the century between Fnatic and G2 Esports. It will be the third game of the day, but we did want to preview it a little bit just because of the importance of this game. Now, we said it before, G2 is already locked in first, but if you're G2 Esports, and if you know the historic rivalry that you've had with Fnatic over the years, you don't want to drop this game.
No, absolutely not. And you look at these two teams, and this is where the sort of jokes about Dynasty, Legacy, Kings all came from, because it was Fnatic, right, for the start of EULCS back in the day that just won everything. And then G2, 3 years ago, just came right in and just stole the crown right from the squad.
Yeah, in 2016, nobody really expected it, but G2 Esports joined the league and they won 4 trophies in a row. Nobody even came close. And then, of course, Fnatic Nation attacked and took over again last year. So there is so much between these two teams and so much importance that I think they consider each other big rivals. Even if it doesn't matter for G2 and it matters for Fnatic for second place, you don't want to lose. You don't want to have that feeling going into playoffs that you lost against the team that you may be meeting in the final or earlier.
I mean, obviously for Fnatic, they need this win to get into playoffs to probably even get that second place.
Yeah.
And especially with this rivalry they have, and after Caps left Fnatic to G2, I think the rivalry get even bigger. So I think it's going to be a spicy matchup and probably one of the best matchups we could have on LEC right now.
I definitely hope so. And for something a tad more poetic, maybe the LEC finals, they take place in Rotterdam, as you know. And Rotterdam is where G2 Esports lifted their very first trophy in 2016. Now, I don't know if that's going to be a good or a bad omen for them. Time will tell. But one thing is certain, whoever wins this match of the week between G2 and Fnatic takes a massive step forward towards the championship.
Fnatic always ruled Europe, but ever since G2 burst onto the scene, everything changed.
Fnatic and G2 has shared all of the trophies other than one.
They are the 2 most successful orgs. G2 Fnatic is just the battle of who will win the split.
Ocelot and G2 Esports lost their throne over a year ago.
Put your hands together for the Spring Split Finals!
Fnatic straight up embarrassed G2 Esports.
Oh, Caps! He just solo killed Bud! Are you kidding me? That is a kill!
And this time, they are back, but Fnatic will do anything in their power to stop them.
For us, it's about getting the win versus G2 to show that we can get another title.
In one of the most monumental roster changes, Caps left his world finalist team to go over to the rival G2 Esports.
He wants to prove us that he made the right decision leaving us. Obviously, we want to make him feel the opposite.
They are pretty mad with what I did, but I've already been confirmed that what I did was the right thing.
Insta-claim from Caps. Paddle Star onto Nemesis. G2 destroyed Fnatic.
So I'm just going to try to prove it even more next week.
It's up to us to lose to them and not for them to take it from us.
They're running down Hilly, 100 HP first blood.
For the last 3 years, Reckless and Perkz have been in a never-ending chain of rivalry. But since this year, they fight each other face to face in the bottom lane.
I feel like they don't do what a bot lane would normally do. That's one of the big reasons as to why they have been losing games lately.
I aim for perfection. I don't aim for being a farm bot for late game. I actually respect Reckless a lot, but I just don't feel like he's a threat to me.
If Fnatic can beat G2, they will have a huge mental advantage going into the playoffs.
They're going to go into playoffs thinking that we're going to have to face Fnatic, and the last time we played them, they beat us.
Whoever wins it is probably going to take the title.
The goal is to take the split, and the goal is to win MSI. The goal is to create the legacy.
If Fnatic beat Caps, without Caps, they prove to everyone that nothing can stop them.
Holy moly, the goosebumps are absolutely real. Caps versus Nemesis, Broxa versus Jankos, Reckless versus Perkz. Do I need to continue? So many rivalries. I also was completely taken off guard by Buipo saying, whoever wins this game wins the championship. I mean, that's going a bit far, but it just shows to me how much stake all these players put in this specific game so close to playoffs.
I mean, I really love LEC because 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, when we saw this match, it was not even close.
No,
it was like we could not even create a rivalry or anything like that. It was just G2 dominating against Fnatic, and right now we actually have one of the most beautiful maps we could see in Europe.
And I think it's important you bring that up, the fact that Fnatic has really turned things around since that week 5. They are now on a 6-game winning streak, and they are the most impressive team in the second half of the split. And that's why I think, and I hope, that this one is going to become more interesting than the Stomp last time around.
Exactly, because G2, they're the best team from the first half of the split. Fnatic are the best team of the second half of the split. And a lot of that has come from just their ability to sort of adapt and improve week over week. I think they've leveled up their early game so much, and it's really showing in these
So is any of you two willing to say that Fnatic is the best team right now?
I'm not gonna say it yet. Probably tomorrow we can say it, but
let's watch the game and find out.
Wow,
I mean,
what a cop-out.
It's true that before, with how the meta was before, with this many flexes, with Irelia, Akali being flexed around every single lane, G2 looks so strong. It was perfect for them when they could play any single mages in bot lane. Perkz was playing Zoe, Perkz was playing whatever he wanted, and then they were flexing the Akali, the Irelia, every single champion. Right now, the meta is a bit more stable, and that hurt them a bit more. And especially with Mikey X being out and Promiscu being in, there is a support he came up to the team. I think I'm going to vote for Fnatic completely for this game.
Yeah, I mean, that is very, very true. This is also our featured matchup. Reckless versus Perkz in the bottom lane is one of the ones we're looking at, and Reckless versus his old teammate, Caps. But it will remain to be seen if Perkz is that dominating now that he has to deal with a different support.
Yeah, it's definitely a question. I mean, obviously, we know that Perkz has been playing with Promiscu for the last few weeks at the very least, but still, you take Mickey X, who was one of, if not the best support in the LEC, it's obviously going to bring some changes here to G2.
Yeah, we'll be able to look at that bottom lane, and more specifically, Reckless on twitch.tv/RiotGames2, because that will be the POV stream for this match of the week. So don't forget, a Game 3 Fnatic versus G2, but that is not the only joy to watch today. We will have 5 games that all matter in the race for the championship. So let's take a look at what we've got in store here on day 1. We'll kick the day off with Misfits versus Splice, which immediately is so important. Misfit lose, they're out of playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, this team has been struggling, right? Well, Splice is on the rise, so Misfits absolutely need to come in and win this game, or they can kiss playoffs goodbye.
Yeah, there we go. Of course, Excel and Rogue no longer in the running, but they can play spoiler for SK and Vitality today.
Yeah, obviously, SK need this win to get to playoffs, so it's really important for them. Same from Vitality to get that second spot.
Yeah, and the same for the last game of the day. Origen wants to be second. Schalke, of course, needs to get into playoffs, so everything is so incredibly important, as is the race for Superior Analyst. I do want an update of how things are going, because it's a pretty close fight. Me and StatsBot are looking to make up some spots to Drakos and the LEC fans, because just a little shout out, those fans are crushing it. They're just winning. They always have the right prediction. What's going on?
I don't know. I feel like I'm supposed to be, you know, getting paid to be an analyst, all these things. Then
you
Twitter,
suck, man.
Yeah, Twitter comes in like, no, you're wrong. You suck.
Yeah, I do want to explain one of my votes. So I voted for Misfits, and I thought this was a tough one because, yes, Schalke bounced back, of course. That's the last game. Sorry, Schalke bounced back versus Misfits and kind of embarrassed them in that game. But every time I've been in the studio, Misfits have won. So this is my final test, if I have the right influence on them or not.
Okay, so I don't know what your like voodoo thing is with Misfits thinking they're gonna win, but like Splice are competing for second place. This team just beat G2. Come on.
I mean,
Splice.
I think it's fair to say Misfits, because when we had Reckless on the post-game lobby, he was the one saying that when experienced players get to these pressure moments is when they play the best. Misfits, we have a lot of veteran players, a lot of really all-star players. And if they have to play at some point on a good League of Legends, it has to be today.
So what about last week?
Yeah,
I'm waiting for these wins, and they're just not coming.
It wasn't enough pressure that time.
Let me also ask you, it looks like Fnatic's playing Fnatic in this one, because everyone's voting for them.
I think it's probably one of the first times in history that the first team is facing the 5th place, and actually they didn't get a single vote, at least from the fans or from the stat boss or even from the greatest
we're
analysts.
We're gonna get flamed no matter what. Now we're Fnatic fanboys. If they lose, we're idiots. Like, what are we gonna do?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things going into that vote, right? One, of course, is that Mickey X is out, Promiscu is in, and we just don't know what that's going to do to the team. And the other is that Fnatic have just been stomping in the second half of the split.
Well, it just goes to show how exciting everything is this weekend. There's a lot on the line, and with that, of course, also comes extra pressure for the players. They have to step up. Ender, break it down for me. Who do you have your eye on? Who needs to step up this weekend?
Well, Sjokz, I have my eyes on 3 players with the fight for playoffs heating up. Now, coming up in these weekend's matches, my eyes go to Schalke right off the bat because they've been off the decline, but they found a win last weekend and still sit right on the edge of the playoff picture. Now, Schalke was leading the charge during the start of the split, but has struggled to find their form in the last few weeks. The team needed a surge of life to turn this split around, and last week, that was Odwamne. His cannon absolutely terrorized Misfits and gave me flashbacks to the Schalke from the start of the split. Now that they have found their footing, my eyes are on Odwamne to lead the team from the top lane and to pull out some more impressive performances on champs like the Kennen. But as we get closer and closer to the postseason, games are getting longer and a higher importance is being put on having a strong team fight and a stronger AD carry. This is true of no team more than Splyce. Now, it should come as no surprise that Splyce prefer the long game, and because of that, Kobbe becomes the focal point of this team in the 5v5. And just last week, Splyce shocked all and took down the #1 G2 with Kobbe playing a perfect Sivir. Now, all split long, we've heard about Xerxes, how he sets up his team with clutch early plays, and with Xerxes in the spotlight, Splyce has been a good team. But if you think Splyce can go from good to great and make a deep run into playoffs, well, then you'll want to keep your eyes on Kobbe because he will be the difference in this team's playoff runs. Now, whilst things have been on the up and up for Splyce, Misfits, they're a team on the brink of elimination. And with no time left, this team is in desperate need of 2 wins this weekend. Last week, Misfits couldn't get it done. This week, they have to. And for that to happen, Misfits need Zoaz more than ever to show up big. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that Misfits are going to make it into playoffs, but I will say that the only way they do is if Zoaz shows up and turns this split around.
I mean, I have to echo that completely. Zoaz and the rest of that Misfits team, they have to turn it around, and it's not like they've got a couple of weeks to do it in. It's right now. If they lose one single game, they are out of the playoffs, and Misfits is up versus Splyce, who you also talked about as being the team that is really hitting that stride. But for Misfits, it's really one of those big mysteries. Or is it? Is it a case of all these big stars and personalities together not being the recipe for success? Something else has to click as well, Araneae.
I mean, I think they have a lot of pressure. I've been talking with Zoaz how pressured they were coming to this split because it's a super team, for saying anyhow. But at the same time, Zoaz was feeling the pressure if they might lose a single match. And after this first loss they had on, I believe it was week 2 or week 3, he was kind of sad about the result. He thought that the team might struggle after that, and it was exactly what happened. The team started struggling. They had so many mental problems, and they never actually came up to a good result after that.
To be completely honest, that makes me even more worried about Misfits because back then they were winning everything. They were super convincing. We pegged them as finalists before week 3 of the spring split, and one loss put them on tilt so much. Whew, that seems like a lot to turn around, Ender. How can they do it?
Well, they just need to start winning games, honestly, because when I look at this team, this is a team that should be going to Rotterdam, that should be fighting for 2nd place at least, but also 1st place. Like, this team has all the keys for success when you look at the actual roster at hand, and that is where it gets actually to be a bigger issue to me, because if you have this roster and you can't find wins, you can't even find your way into playoffs, I think you have to make a change.
Yeah, that's very interesting that that lineup just doesn't seem to gel at the right time. Of course, Zoaz is always very vocal on Twitter after they win or they lose. He sent out a tweet basically saying, yeah, well, it's very tough if you have such high expectations and you cannot work towards them. And maybe we even have to look at summer. That makes me think, no, stop right there. You guys are great. Zoaz, you are one of the most experienced and best players in the history of the game. Same with many of the members on your team. I don't want to hear that. I want to see you leave everything on the Rift this weekend.
I fully agree with you. The problem for Misfits is that it's just not in their hands anymore. They need to win both of their games, and they still need the teams around them to lose. Yeah, but do you want to
go out and go 0-2 in the final week and see that your opponent...
No, you want to win all your games.
But Sjokz, you have to think that they are a lot pressure. They have a lot of pressure inside them. So actually, by saying this, by putting this tweet saying like, hey, maybe we have to focus on summer.
It deflects them.
Yeah, you reduce the pressure, so probably this week they can perform better by having no pressure.
But I thought they needed the pressure to win.
That was what Reckless said. I didn't say that.
It's the mind games, and I'm sure everyone wants to deal with the pressure in their own way, but someone who will know a thing or two about the pressure that Misfits is dealing with is their coach, Moose, and Laure is standing by with him for some words.
Thank you very much, Sjokz, and thank you, Hussein, for joining me. I gotta say, this is do or die for Misfits. How do you come in this week knowing that the fate of your split is no longer in your hands?
So last week was quite a disappointment because over the past 3 weeks, every single week has been a better week of practice for us. We've actually improved a lot from where we were before during the initial slump. And for whatever reasons, we couldn't show that on stage at all last weekend. It got worse each day. And so we discussed a lot about that at the start of this week. And now I think we're just hoping to see that translate to stage because, again, this week of practice was really, really good.
I agree, and this is really good to hear because last time I talked to Fabi, he addressed some issues about synergy and maybe communication on stage. What is your take on that, especially coming today against Splyce?
It was weird because in scrims we've been pretty proactive and we've all been making plans and all been committing to the same plan. But last weekend on stage, for some reason, anytime someone said something, we were just reacting to everything. We were all over the place. This week, we've also touched on that a lot. I think people are playing with a lot more confidence now, certain individuals especially, and so I'm just hoping that that shows on stage.
Okay, so knowing this, what does Misfits need to do to come out strong in week 9?
We're just hoping for a 2-0, and then after that, you know, wherever the cards fall, they fall. But at the least, whether we go into playoffs or whether we end the season here, or the split here rather, we just want to make sure that we end on a strong note.
Thank you very much for your insights and good luck for today, obviously. Now back to you, Sjokz.
Thank you very much. I heard the word hope a whole lot, but I also heard we have to win. We have to make it happen. However the cards may fall, we can't leave anything behind, and I'm glad Moose is saying that at least.
I mean, yeah, obviously Moose is coming in and he's trying to make things happen behind the scenes, and that's where the sort of disconnect happens to me, because if it's working behind the scenes, we need to see it on stage.
Yeah, and it needs to work versus Splyce, as you elaborated about earlier, and they are doing fantastically. And in the beginning, we may have said they're slow and they get 1-1s every week, but it seems to be the best strategy because they are winning so much that they are looking to lock second place by the end of this weekend. Araneae, what is so good about Splyce?
I mean, I think right now the current roster of Splyce, they have something better than last split, that is Tachi. I believe Tachi is playing so well with Sjokz that it's not the same we seen last year with Araneae. I think Tachi is there's the perfect top laner for Splyce. He adapts perfectly into these slow-pace games that Splyce puts every single day. So I think we have a better Splyce and probably one of the best Splyce we've seen in history.
I haven't been this excited about Splyce in many, many years. No offense to the previous lineups, but they just bring something different. And I think we saw that especially in their win versus G2 Esports. And no matter what it means for G2, winning against the #1 in the standings is always going to give you a boost.
It absolutely is, Sjokz. And for Splyce, the most impressive thing for me is their ability to team fight in the late game. They put all the eggs in the Kabe basket, and you see a performance like this on the Sivir, and you just feel hope for this team going forward into playoffs.
Yeah, and I want to add a little caveat to that because they still do this, but G2, they cleaned up not in the late game. They cleaned up very fast, and they had Xerxes showing up, they had Vizicachi showing up, they had Norscaran showing up, they also had Humanoid showing up, and I think they are adding a couple of things to their playbook, which makes them so impressive going into this final weekend and the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, the pieces of like Xerxes early game and those sorts of things were always kind of there for Splyce. It was just about putting together the entire package, bundling up the early, mid, and late game. And now that we've seen them do that against G2, this team is a force to be reckoned with.
Hey, they are. And of course, Kabe, that franchise player for Splyce, it's a guy we don't talk about too often because he's never been bad. He's actually always been good and very consistent. But it seems like this year, he's finally shining and getting the praise he deserves.
I think Splyce playing a lot around him. He has the highest damage percentage of all the league, I believe, with almost 44%, and it's insane how good he's playing compared with other years. Last years we had Splyce or this team more around Wonder, more around other players than around him, and this year that they're playing around him, he's showing up.
I voted for Misfits. You voted for Misfits?
I voted for Misfits.
You voted for Misfits. So you tell me why Misfits is going to win.
You guys are crazy.
No, but you paid me for both for Misfits, right?
You tell me why Splyce is going to win.
Splyce just beat G2. This team knows what they're doing. Kabe is absolutely popping off down bottom lane. I don't even think it's going to be close. I think Splyce take it easily.
So more of the same for Splyce. But what is Misfits going to bring today that's going to bring them this game?
I think it's all about the games. Like, they have to win to get to playoffs. They are a really stuck team. They are a really good team, and they really need this win.
Name me one name. Who is going to do it on that lineup? Who needs to step up?
Fabian.
Febiven needs to step up in the mid lane versus Humanoid. Let's take a look, because Misfits, they need to go 2-0, and Splyce need to win to protect their spot in second place. Every game counts, so let's get started with our first game, Misfits versus Splyce.